The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
In the District of Columbia, nothing is easy, but it's a done deal. Finally, we can be assured that there will be a stadium built on the RFK site, and if all goes well, the Washington Commanders will open the 2030 season at this new stadium, which may have RFK in its name, may still be sponsored by Northwest, may have something else, but the big thing is they're home. They're back where they should be. They're back in the spot where most of us grew up at that time, rooting for them in that part of the city and the great memories that go along with it. And by the time they get there, you're going to have, hopefully, Jayden Daniels in his prime and an ownership group that has figured out a lot of things. They figured out a lot already, but they get better and better at it. And by the time they get to the 2030 season, maybe they will be a Super Bowl contender and possibly even a Super Bowl winner in the period in between, in the 5 seasons, including this one, that they will play before they get into the new stadium. So some pretty cool stuff to talk about. Again, nothing happens in the District of Columbia without drama. And we found out about this time yesterday. Whoa, wait a minute. The city has asked for some new things, and the team is pushing back. Yeah, yesterday morning, the council still discussing potential changes. Then Mark Klaus sent a blistering letter, writing in part, less than 24 hours before the final vote, the Commanders organization was presented with a list of unworkable and impractical new last-minute demands by council members, which we simply cannot agree to as it jeopardizes the deal. Most demands were made verbally without supporting documentation. Given our deep engagement with the council over many months and our proven willingness to address any council member feedback, this is unexpected and unfortunate. Phil Mendelson, the city council president, who initially was opposed to the deal but came around as negotiations continued, said, yeah, we've had a lot of discussion with the team. He says, I think it's fair to say that the team, which focuses on football and not on the legislative process, is quite frustrated with what it sees as a lot of last-minute asks. So maybe that's the way they do business. Hey, we got a deal. Oh, yeah, for this formality of the final vote, we want to do this, and that. And the team goes, no, we're not doing that. And in the story in the Post today, it says, in the end, most of the flurry of last-minute amendments, which attempted changes ranging from upping the commander's contribution to a community benefits agreement to introducing new penalties if the team misses development deadlines, failed. I don't think the deadline thing is a big deal. I don't know which construction company is going to build the stadium, but if I had to guess, it's going to be Clark Construction. That's the same construction company that built the now, what's it called now? Capital One Arena. Same one that built Nats Park, and it's the same one that likely will build this new stadium. And this was a big point of contention along the way is the rent. And it's pointed out, that the Nationals pay whatever they pay in rent, millions of dollars a year. The Commanders will pay $1 in rent for about 30 years, but will have to start paying additional rent earlier if they miss certain deadlines for building housing. Okay, I think they're going to get that done. I don't think that's going to be that big of a deal. So there's a lot of flexing and so forth. But in the end, they get the deal done. It's close to $4 billion. Commanders are also going to pay for cost overruns on this, the $2.7 billion that they're kicking in, plus the city's $1 billion if it goes over that, and it probably will, that they will pay for that as well. And they're going to make out because they got control of a lot of the land around the stadium, and they're going to build housing, and it's the best thing for the city. It is. I'm sure you can find an argument for that, but I think with a downtown stadium for the football team in this town. Now, it's not the case in every town. Like Chicago, they're going to build a new stadium in the suburbs. It may make sense for them. But for this city and the way this works with Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia, where you have Maryland people who never go to Virginia, Virginia people who never go to Maryland, but everybody goes to D.C., that it makes sense, and I'm glad it's all going to happen. As for the seats that pop up and down, that this romantic notion of the whole stadium shaking. No, the whole stadium didn't shake. There were temporary seats that were put in. I think it was not until Lombardi came. I'll have to do some more research on this, but I think it was in 1969 that they had these temporary seats put in for football. Because remember, it opened as a multi-purpose stadium in 1961 and really mainly for baseball. That's the way it was built. Same thing with the other stadiums built about that time. The Vet in Philadelphia, Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh, Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati. They were all like what they call cookie cutter stadiums and built primarily for baseball, even though they were shared with the football teams. And so I think around 69, when Lombardi came, they put in these temporary seats that would go in after the baseball season ended. Now, that would be, after the first month of the year. So the first game or two at the stadium, they didn't have these temporary seats. And then they started to put them in at the end of the baseball season. And that was only for a couple of years because the Senators left after the 1971 season. So the temporary seats stayed. And that's what bounced up and down. And there is that incredible piece of footage from NFL Films on the championship game with the stadium, those seats, the temporary seats, bouncing up and down. And you hear Frank Herzog, and now the stadium shakes. That's an image. That's not the whole stadium. Because believe me, if the whole stadium was shaking, it wouldn't still be standing to the point where they're now starting to tear it down piece by piece. In fact, they're almost done with that, the latest pictures that I've seen. And if you're wondering why they didn't blow it up, it's because when it was built in 1961, there's a lot of asbestos there, and they don't want all that dust spreading around the city. So everybody can take a deep breath and wait till September of 2030 when the Commanders will start to play there, and we can all watch the progress as the stadium goes up. I think they're supposed to break ground sometime next year, and be fun to see it go up. All right. Yesterday, we got an update on Jayden Daniels, as Dan Quinn had promised on Monday when he declared him day-to-day, and this is what Quinn said before practice yesterday.
Jayden had good rehab session today. He also threw out on the field. He won't practice today, and then as we get into Friday, I'll give you an assessment of where we're at after we go through practice on Friday.
How much are you finding that you're having to hold him back from doing too much at this point?
Yeah, we're going through that process. Like, that's him as a competitor. But we also, recognize the importance of the person, the player, what he means to the franchise. So we're also going to be smart, not just fast in this assessment. But this is a player that's absolutely wanting to do everything all the time. So it was a good start to the week for us, throwing the movements at the position. So I know we've talked a little bit about return to play, but there are position-specific skills that you do for each one. So he hit those today, which was a good start. And then, like I said, I'll give you the final update on Friday.
Do you need to see him back on the field with the rest of the team?
Yes.
Before you feel okay?
Yeah, I would. It's important, timing, reps, the movements. But it was a good first step to it, Nikki. But, we'd have to get some reps for sure.
2 more opportunities for that. They got to practice today and practice tomorrow. And if we don't see Jayden in either one, sounds like it's unlikely he's going to play. If I had to guess, if I had to make a bet today, I'd make a bet that Marcus Mariota is going to start the game. I think that's the way this is going. It makes the most sense. Mariota has played well when he's come in. Not that they think this way, but they can beat the Raiders without Jayden Daniels, I think. And just the way that they have always talked about Mariota, the fact that he's probably one of the higher paid backups in the league, the relationship he has with Jayden Daniels. You're not going to make Jayden Daniels nervous about this. So it just is a very comfortable feel for them to go and play it safe with Mariota this week. This was Quinn yesterday.
He has been like a real standard as a commander, player, teammate in elite ways. And so each player that we would feature, they'd be featured in not exactly the same way, although mobility for him and Jayden and, kind of coming up in similar styles, but not exactly the same also. So for all the guys, we have, ways that we'd feature them and how we would play if called upon, and that's what we'll do. But, we have, the utmost confidence in him.
Yeah, so there's that. There's not the big worry about that. And even for the speed issue, and clearly, Mariota is not Jayden Daniels when it comes to speed, but what Mariota said yesterday was the offense really doesn't change that much.
What's been nice is we've been able to kind of keep things very similar, regardless of who's playing at the position, even during preseason. And if it comes down to it, Cliff will ask me what things I like, what I don't like, and then we'll just roll. But from that standpoint, from an offensive standpoint, like with our abilities across the quarterback room, like it's been nice the fact that we can kind of keep the same system throughout each guy.
And he says that whether he's starting or not, the preparation for every game is the same.
Well, for me, I've always tried to approach it the same. So I always try to approach it like I'm going to play. That way, if the scenario happens where I'm given the opportunity to play, nothing changes for me on a week-to-week basis. So my routine stays the same, and I think it just kind of creates that normal procedure for me, and it allows me just to go out there and play and not have to worry about, okay, I got to do this extra, I got to do that. Like I just kind of stick to my process and allow that process to work.
Last thing from Mariota, and I guess it were a normal quarterback room, quarterback situation, where the backup is, always thinking he's a starter and competing for the job. This is a different situation. So this was an interesting answer to the question, what advice do you give Jayden Daniels in this situation where he's a possibility to play but may not play?
I think it comes down to if you feel like you can do what you normally do, then go ahead. I've been in situations, scenarios like this where you try to fight through it and maybe you're not playing like yourself, and it's hard because you want to be able to be out there for your team and, kind of tough it out, so to say. But I think at the end of the day, like, you want to be able to be the best version of yourself, and we understand Jay's going to do everything in his power to be able to be ready to play. But I think that's what's cool about our quarterback room is that we're so close, and regardless whoever's in there, like, we're going to support that guy. So we always tell him, man, just be you, and if you feel like through the course of this week you get back to that point, great, and we'll support you. You'll be ready to roll. If you need a week, then that's okay. I'll be ready to go too. So it comes down to just having that communication and just making sure he understands that we support his decision, whatever that is.
And most likely it's not going to be Jayden's call. They'll consult with him. If there's any question whether he'll play, they'll have a long conversation with him. But I think a lot of it's going to be what the doctors say and how he looks on the field. I am sure that Daniels wants to get out there and play. He played last year with a broken rib. And that game against Chicago in late October, they didn't know until a couple hours before the game if he was going to be activated. He winds up throwing the Hail Mary pass. We didn't know this at the time, but he was playing with a broken rib. So I don't think they're going to go that far this year. And given that it's a very, very long season, I mean, that was the first one with him. They were further along in it than they are now. So I think they play it safe. And also they keep in mind what Mina Kimes said the other day on ESPN.
My concern for this, Dan, to your point, is more about Jayden Daniels' career. He has to take less contact. Through the first 2 weeks of the season, he leads all quarterbacks in QB contact, 29, both as a passer, QB hits, and scrambling. And you can say, well, he played two difficult defenses. The Packers' defense looks amazing. He led all quarterbacks in QB contact last year. He led all quarterbacks in scramble rate last year. It's just not sustainable. And he is a quarterback who can win from the pocket, and he can be a part of that designed run game without it being the bulk of it the way it has been, frankly, through much of the season. So I think there's got to be some tough conversations with Daniels about his style of play with an eye towards his continued longevity, because he is too special to absorb this much contact.
So that was Mina Kimes the other day. Yesterday on NFL Live, which is hosted by Laura Rutledge with Dan Orlovsky and Field Yates, they kicked around the same idea, and interesting to hear the perspective of Orlovsky, who was not a quarterback at Jayden Daniels' level, but played 12 years in the NFL.
Mina talked about the other day that he's the most contacted quarterback in football last year. He is this year. Yep. It's part of his game. We're coming off of the news of Joe Burrow and the added up hits with him. Yep. It's just like, can the Commanders just take a step back, and kind of all of us take a step back with the quarterback position and be like, while the athleticism is going to expose you to more, can we still have that while also some of the old school philosophy of like, I don't want my quarterback to get touched ever, you know? And so where is the middle ground for Washington. Where's the middle ground for all of us in all these teams when it comes to these quarterbacks that are athletic weapons? But you don't want them to ever get touched.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you got to win games too, and sometimes the only way to win the game is to have the quarterback be a hero.
And I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
It's can you live in both worlds?
You know what the answer is in May and April as coaches, they all said the same thing. We're going to run our quarterback a whole lot less this year. And then we get to September and games are on the line.
It's third and one in the fourth quarter.
Got to have a situation. All right, Josh Allen running power once again. It happens.
Let's say that Daniels cannot go this week. Marcus Mariota is the backup, as you heard Adam referencing. How does this change things for the scheme for the Commanders?
Yeah, so Marcus obviously a very athletic quarterback, but not nearly the same tier as Jayden. So there's going to be a little bit of a simplification of the running game from that regard. Marcus also a much more experienced player than Jayden, but I just think the overall offense probably, the playbook shrinks a little bit.
Yeah.
The part about the brilliance of Jayden Daniels, and I want to give a ton of credit to Cliff Kingsbury and the entire staff for what they have done with Jayden, is the stuff that keeps defensive coordinators up at night is the unscripted stuff.
Right.
We play perfect alignment, perfect scheme. We dial it up at the exact right time.
Third and 7, we cover everybody.
And then, bam, he scrambles for 8 yards or he throws the dart to somebody in a tight window. So that's the stuff that even if you can't account for it as defensive coordinator, makes you most nervous. And that's what Marcus Mariota does not bring to the table, at least not at the same level as Jayden Daniels.
No question about it. No question about it. You know, you're looking for competent quarterback play. You got to be able to run the football. And that's going to be more difficult without Austin Eckler. They're moving up Bill to number 1. I would imagine that we're going to see some other running backs involved in the game as well. And, yeah, I mean, what they say about Jayden Daniels is 100% correct. When it looks like there's nothing there, he can take off and run. It's why he was the leading rusher last year. They don't really want that, but that's part of what makes him great. And you got to figure out that balance of – we don't want to take away those skills. That's what makes him so dangerous. But on the other hand, we need him for all 17 games. And if and when we get to the playoffs, you know, we could have 4 more games that we need him for. So that's what they're balancing right now. And I would think if there's any question whatsoever that Marcus Mariota is the starter, unless Jayden Daniels is absolutely 100%. If they look at the MRI and go, oh, wow, it's a miracle. He looks perfect. Other than that, I think you're going to see number 8. And by the way, Marcus Mariota back to number 8, which is the number that Brian Robinson wore here for 3 years, and Mariota's worn that the bulk of his career, wore 18 last year. So just in case you want to know your player without a program. Probably familiar with Ross Tucker, but maybe you're not. Played college football at Princeton and hung around the NFL for a while, about 6-7 years, played 5 different teams. Was here, played for the Steve Spurrier Redskins, also played for the Patriots, the Cowboys, a couple other teams in there. And he does a podcast now, and he also does a lot of games, a lot of NFL games, either radio or television. And he's doing the radio game tonight as the Buffalo Bills are home against the Miami Dolphins, and the Bills may be the best team in football, while the Dolphins right now are probably the worst and in a complete mess with a coach who at one time was kind of the toast of the league. He didn't look like an NFL coach, didn't sound like an NFL coach, didn't dress like an NFL coach, and it was all good when they were winning. Now they're losing and losing ugly. And there is some thought that if they really lose ugly tonight to the Bills, even though the Bills are a really good team and it's on the road, that this could be it for Mike McDaniel. Again, only 2 games into the season, and they got some games coming up that they can win, including a home game against the Jets, and that's with plenty of rest because they don't play them until a week from Monday, and then they go to Carolina, which is another team that they could beat. So maybe the owner waits it out, maybe he doesn't. But if tonight is ugly, Ross Tucker said this on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday.
I always say that primetime games count like 5X in the court of public opinion, you know? Yeah. So if it's a primetime game, everybody's watching all at the same time. If they look really bad on Thursday night, if they get blown out, then it's almost like they got a lot of time before that next game. It's almost like a mini bye. You have the whole weekend for the owner to just think about it and simmer over it. I think there is the possibility, if it's that bad on Thursday night, that they would move on from McDaniel. Oh. I think it's more likely that they would give him the next few games, but then that's always an interesting one too, because if the owner's already made up his mind, does he want to give him the chance to win those next couple games? The problem as I see it for the Dolphins is they kind of tried to put the toothpaste back in the tube a little bit. I mean, everybody knows that the players, I guess the nicest way to phrase it would say that the players had a lot of freedom or have a lot of freedom down there and with the culture. And so they tried to pull back on that a little bit and make it a little bit more restrictive. I think that's really hard to do in life, right? Like, because these players know what you've been like the last couple of years. Now all of a sudden you're going to change. So it's like, okay, so first of all, we don't really buy it. We don't really buy you're going to change. And secondly, if you're going to change, then you're not really being who you are. You're not really being authentic. It's almost like you can't win either way at that point.
But do players want to be coached by, a Dan Campbell? Or, because I'll hear, he's a players coach, players manager. And then, like Terry Francona was the perfect manager in Boston until he wasn't the perfect manager. They're taking advantage of him. He's too nice of a guy. He's a players manager. That's why they're winning. Come on. Make up your mind. Do players want to be coached like Belichick or coached by Mike McDaniel?
That is such an awesome question that people don't ask enough. And part of it is why when they're doing the pre-draft process, they try to find the guys that want to be coached hard, can take criticism, and also are self-motivated, disciplined. Because you know what the truth is, Dan? I played for 5 teams. You know that. Football players are just like most people out there. A lot of football players, they'd rather have a shorter practice. They'd rather not have pads on. They'd rather not have the discipline or everybody. I think most people in society have a tendency to drift towards wanting the easier path, the easy way out. What you need to try to do is have as many guys on your team as possible that won't accept that. But I think that's the natural default for a lot of guys. And I think the Dolphins have certainly fallen into that.
Yeah, I think a lot can be said for that. There is also this, as you're working your way up the ladder in your job, you sort of earn things that become a little bit easier, like what time your shift is, the things that you have to do. I mean, those things come along with that. In football, it really doesn't work that way. You should be working as hard in your 5th year in the league as you did as a rookie. That makes some sense. So, yeah, that people do kind of drift over to the easy part of it. And look, the coaches that have been highly successful, that have won a lot of Super Bowls, they're not easy to play for. A lot of people have talked, a lot of players have talked about what it was like to play for Bill Walsh. Bill Walsh is one of the greatest minds ever in the history of football. He invented the West Coast offense. He saw in Joe Montana what nobody else saw, took him in the 3rd round, developed him into arguably one of the best, if and some would even say the best quarterback of all time. He was a genius, but he was tough to play for. Tom Landry, I knew a lot of players who played for Tom Landry when I was working in Dallas. And they said Tom Landry was someone who didn't change during the course of the season. His expression never changed. He had a very calm demeanor to him, but he also never mixed it up. I think Joe Gibbs had a really good understanding of that. Gibbs used to say, I want players with character, but I also want characters on my team. And he knew that over the course of a long season, you'd get kind of worn out with the same thing all the time. So if you had something to mix it up a little bit, you'd have some juice. And the Gibbs teams always got better at the end of the year. The Landry teams were great, but he lost more Super Bowls than he won. He was always considered to be the bridesmaid till he finally won one against the Miami Dolphins in 1972. At that point, he'd been coaching for 13 years. And nowadays, coach doesn't get that much opportunity to stay, but they believed in him. A terrible start, as you would expect, with an expansion team in the early 60s, and he developed one of the great teams of that era. But, I think what Ross Tucker is saying is true. And, even though you got this now players coach and everybody likes him and yada, 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 you probably need somebody who's going to crack the whip a little bit. And this was the thing with Club J. Not that Jay Gruden was ever in the conversation with the great coaches, but he was kind of a player's guy, and the workouts weren't tough, and certain things that he did were not conducive to having great football teams. He did produce a couple of winning teams. He got a team to the playoffs, but other than that, I would not characterize it as a great success, although, you always have to couch it with, but he was working for Dan Snyder. Coming up, Dabo Swinney getting real defensive about his 1-2 team. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Clemson coach Dabo Swinney is one of the highest paid coaches in college football, probably north of $10 million a year. And he got that money by taking Clemson to the national championship game a couple of times, winning a national championship, being in the conversation for the national title every year. But even though that was not that long ago, college football has changed dramatically since he won his national championship. The transfer portal is huge. He was slow to embrace that. The NIL is a big factor. He once said, once they start paying the players, I'm out. That didn't happen, and they paid him very well. And now he's got a team that's 1-2. And they got beat on a field goal at the end of the game by Wake Forest. If you're going to be in the national championship conversation making $10 million a year, you don't lose to Wake Forest. And he did. And so the heat's being turned up at Clemson, as it should be, because you don't pay a guy $10 million a year to go to the CarQuest Bowl. You want to be in the playoff, and the playoff is now 12 teams. And at 1-2, unless there's a dramatic turnaround in this season, they're not going to be in the playoff. And people are talking about Dabo Swinney getting booted out. I don't know what the buyout is. It's probably one of these crazy ones, where it's like $70 million a year, like it is at Alabama, like it was at Texas A&M for Jimbo Fisher. So who knows what it's going to take if they want to get him out. But his response to all that, try it.
And hey, listen, if Clemson's tired of winning, they can send me on my way, but I'm going to go somewhere else and coach. I ain't going to the beach. Hell, I'm 55. I got a long way to go. Y'all going to have to deal with me for a while. I got a long way to go. I'm just getting going. I'm just now good enough to be a head coach. I'm just now figuring it out. So we'll be around a while.
So that was the chesty response from Dabo Swinney. And he also said, that anybody who's out on us when we lose 2 games by 1 play probably wasn't in on us in the beginning. Tony and Mike tackling this yesterday on Pardon the Interruption and what the heat must be now like for Dabo.
Seems Dabo's feeling some heat, Tony. Should he be?
No, because he's been to 4 national championships and he's won 2, because he's won 8 out of the last 10 in the ACC, because since Saban is retired, who you got that's actually better than Dabo Swinney? Does he find himself on a hot seat? Billy Napier of Florida finds himself on a hot seat. Yeah, Dabo finds himself on a warm seat. It's not a hot seat. And the reason is because there's no sport that we follow that's like college football, where it's what have you done for me lately?
Yeah, people are crazy. The fan bases are nuts, let's say it.
Swinney was right in everything he said, but it was really whiny. And he looks sort of unhinged. And there are probably people in Clemson right now who are saying this to themselves. They're saying, you know what? Dabo doesn't really believe in a transfer portal. And Dabo's lost a lot more games lately than he used to lose. In fact, he's lost 14 games in the last 4 seasons, 16 if you count 1 and 2 this year. And there was a period of time from 2012 to 2029 seasons where he didn't lose that many games. So maybe the game has passed him by. That's being said. I don't know how publicly, but it's being said.
You know what? I'd hire Dabo in a heartbeat.
Who wouldn't?
By the way, Florida may hire Dabo in a heartbeat.
Exactly.
But you know what? It's probably just time. Probably time for Dabo to go on. This is not, John Robinson staying at, USC. This is not that. This is not Bear Bryant and Joe Paterno. This isn't. It's a different time. Dabo can go somewhere else, make a fan base really, 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 really excited for a long time.
Yes.
Probably win again, just like he said. But it doesn't need to be Clemson. And the people at Clemson can be stupid, like the people at Nebraska once were, and say, 9-3, 10-2, not good enough for us, and spend the next 15 years in the wilderness.
It reminds me of when Nick Saban used to give those rat poison speeches. And it reminds me of that because Dabo Swinney went to Alabama. You know the smartest thing he ever did? Because he could have had that job. He didn't want that job.
No, you
Let
don't.
Kalen DeBoer suffer in that following the
Speaking of that.
But you're right. He can go anywhere. How much money would Florida put up? Hundreds of millions of dollars to get the guy, right? He's a proven winner.
Look,
Come on.
I am a college football booster.
Take out a checkbook right now for Dabo.
We're all stupid and crazy, and we have expectations that are out of line and out of whack, and we want to fire people, and we want to hire people.
All the time.
This sport, it's part
More
of what
than any
makes
other
it
sport.
exciting,
Yes,
right?
Well, maybe a little bit different for you, Mike. I am a season ticket holder for Maryland. I didn't go to Maryland, but I guess in a very, very, very minuscule way, I'm a booster for the program. Not in the way that you are for Northwestern, so I don't really get a sense of that. But look, you got to realize what you're getting with Dabo. And yes, if Clemson gets rid of him, somebody's going to hire him, and they're going to pay him a lot of money. But I'm not so sure in this modern era that he's necessarily that kind of a coach. Yeah, coaches adapt. Coaches figure it out. I talked to Gary Williams during the basketball season about this, and I really have never felt that Gary would embrace the NIL. The way he coached in a different way. He coached in a different era. He wasn't known for his recruiting, though he did get some excellent players there. Sent a bunch of guys to the NBA, partly because he was such a great coach. But he said he would adapt, so maybe he would. Maybe Dabo will figure this out and get it back. But the other thing about Clemson that's different than Florida, Clemson is still in the ACC, and there really aren't that many competitive games in the ACC. The SEC, you're playing tough teams every week, and it's different. And Dabo was able to get to the championship game. This is before even they had the playoff. I guess they did have the playoff. It was a 14 playoff. He got to that, in part because the regular season wasn't as tough for his team as it was for teams in the SEC and the Big Ten. So, it's kind of like sometimes you look at somebody from the outside and go, boy, you put him in this situation and he's going to really kick butt. Like, for example, Scott Frost. Scott Frost was a great player at Nebraska. If he didn't win the Heisman Trophy, he was a candidate for it. He was that good. And he was a little small to play quarterback in the NFL. I think he tried. He played a year of safety or corner or something. Then he went to University of South Florida and succeeded there big time. They said, well, okay, look at what he's doing there at a small program. They had an undefeated season. Let's bring him to Nebraska. They brought him to Nebraska, his alma mater. It's perfect. A guy who was a great player there, proved himself as a great coach in another program. Disaster. They had to get rid of him. And so I'm not sure that if you take Dabo Swinney out of Clemson and you plop him into Florida or some other SEC team, that he's necessarily going to be successful. Now, I agree 100% with what Tony said about turning down Alabama. That was smart. Yes, you never want to be the guy that follows the guy. You want to be the guy that follows the guy that followed the guy. And then maybe you have a chance to bring it back, which somebody may do. Now, we'll see how the rest of the season plays out for Kalen DeBoer. But losing like they did to Florida State, not good. Not good. And they got to start playing like Alabama pretty soon. The buyout is $70 million. Alabama doesn't have Texas A&M kind of money. Like Wilbon says, we're all stupid as boosters. They don't have enough stupid boosters to buy them out. But I'm not necessarily convinced that you take Dabo Swinney someplace else and he's successful. Meant to mention this yesterday. I am a big fan of Ben & Jerry's. I try to eat it as little as possible, but I love it when I eat it. And at one time, I visited the factory in Vermont when my daughter was 2 years old. A friend of mine and his son, who was also 2, we toured the factory. We watched them actually make Cherry Garcia. We went through the line with the Cherry Garcia, and at the end, they gave us free samples, which was really cool. It's a company that was founded almost 50 years ago by 2 guys who weren't very good athletes, and they would sit around during gym class and dream about opening an ice cream place or opening a business. And so they started Ben & Jerry's in a gas station in Vermont in the 1970s, and it grew into a billion-dollar corporation. But they've always been, socially active. They've been cognizant of the environment. And so Ben is still there. They were bought out by a company called Unilever, but they're kept on as part of the brand and consultants and so forth. But Jerry's out. Jerry Greenfield said, "I'm out." He said in a letter addressing the Ben & Jerry community that the Vermont-based company has lost its independence since the UK parent Unilever curtailed its social activism. And they have been at it for the last few years here for a variety of things that Jerry didn't agree with. And so he said he can no longer in good conscience continue working for a company that has been silenced by Unilever despite a merger agreement meant to safeguard the brand's social mission. So last week, Ben, who's still there, Ben said the brand had attempted to engineer a sale to investors at fair market value between $1.5 billion and $2.5 billion amid tensions with Unilever, but the proposal was rejected. So now when we go to the store and we want Cherry Garcia, are we buying Ben's ice cream? I wonder how this works. I would imagine there's got to be some trademark agreements in this, and that there's no way that Jerry can take his name off the brand. Interesting if he could, Well, what is Ben's ice cream? I've never heard of Ben's ice cream, but Ben & Jerry is a brand, so I guess it stays. But Jerry's out. Kind of a sad way to go. If you ever see the movie City Slickers, I think it's Paymer is his last name, and Josh Mostel. They play essentially Ben & Jerry. And they're part of the whole picture. And there's the campfire scene, and one says, "Oh, he can pick the perfect ice cream for the meal." And he said, "Oh, Franks and beans. Oh yes, vanilla and chocolate. Oh, he's a genius." So that was pretty funny. But I love the product. And I'm pretty much in line politically, I think, with Jerry. But Jerry's out, and Ben soldiers on with a company that is not embracing the values that they had. All right, coming up, more from Dan Quinn on the condition of Jayden Daniels heading into Sunday's game, and also 60 years ago today, the debut of I Dream of Jeannie. I kind of find some humor in this. Ted Leonsis, who wanted to yank the hockey team and the basketball team out of the District of Columbia and move it to Virginia and tell everybody, hey, it's no big deal, now wants to own every team in Washington, except, of course, the one that is not going to be for sale, that was sold 2 years ago and continues to increase in value. Ted wants it all. He wants it all. We'll get to what he said about that. More on the Commanders as they get ready to play the Raiders on Sunday. And Mel Kiper has had to recalibrate on Arch Manning, who he hyped as much as anyone did going into the season, but now realizes, whoa, we got to pump our brakes. Let me start with Ted. I guess I should have gotten the audio of this. I just saw this the other day and meant to look this up. He was on a show called The Boardroom on CNBC. And, he's said a number of times that he would like to buy the Nationals. The Nationals are not for sale at the moment, I think. Now, Ted is friendly with Mark Lerner. Mark Lerner sits in Ted's box sometimes and watches games, including playoff games, and Ted goes to Nationals games, and he does want to buy the Nationals. He'd like to have the Nationals for a product for his network, for Monumental Network, and I think with likely the end of Masson in a couple of weeks, the Nationals can get out of their deal with Masson at the end of the season, and I don't think the Orioles survive with Masson. So that goes away, and that gives Ted programming for his network easily with the Nationals, and I'm sure he can make a deal with Rubenstein to put his games on there as well. I think the way this is going, though, they're going to be absorbed by whatever MLB does with these regional cable networks and puts together their own package that'll be on the MLB network. But Ted said at this CNBC show, The Boardroom, that he's interested in buying both the Nationals and D.C. United. But he does say, I think they got to be willing to sell. Now, D.C. United's a mess. They stink. This is their sixth straight losing season. They just fired the general manager. They've been through a bunch of coaches. They're terrible. They got a great place to play. Audi Field's great, but the team has been really, really bad. It was the best team at the beginning. When the MLS started like 25 years ago, they won like 3 out of the first 4 championships. They were really good. But recently they've been a disaster. So maybe they're going to be willing to sell, and Ted can have the soccer team. But I'm not sure about the baseball. He's always the smartest guy in the room. And for a long time, he ran the Wizards like only a fool would run it. This nonsense of giving Bradley Beal a guaranteed contract, and well, of course they all get guaranteed contracts. I mean, a no trade contract in thinking that all the great players are going to want to go play with Bradley Beal because there's certainty he's going to be there. And then finally you threw in the towel, and we'll see what this new group does. They talk a nice game. It's a lot of it's based on how the ping pong balls land in the lottery, and they did not land well for them. They didn't get Cooper Flagg this year. They wound up with the 6th pick instead of potentially the number 1. So, I don't think necessarily that Ted will be such a great owner for the Nationals. I also don't think it's a great idea for him to own 3 of the top 4 teams in town. I don't think that's the best thing. But he did say this. He said, I would buy the Nationals or the Orioles or D.C. United and put them on one platform, put them on one network, have one big data set, and one HR department. He said, that's what media and tech companies do. Okay, well, maybe that's a way to do things. But, again, he's also going to be responsible for hiring the general manager, who hires the manager, and, all those things that go along with owning the team. He's interested in expanding his empire. And Ted's ambitious. He's 68 years old, but he's not slowing down. And he wants to own everything, but I'm not so sure that's a good thing. I would like to see, the Lerners, for one stretch, they were really good. But since the old man passed away, Mark has not really spent any money. A lot of it maybe is related to what happened after the pandemic. A lot of it may be related to the fact that the commercial real estate market crumbled, and that's their business. So maybe that's a factor. But all this talk over the years, Ted would be a great owner. I don't know. I'm not so sure. I think he's done a good job with the Caps. Caps have been a competitive team. They've won a Stanley Cup. But since he got the Wizards after Abe Pollin died in 2009, what have they done? Nothing. And I think that they have been right now. They may be the most irrelevant franchise in sports. They might be, and if you have him own 3 of the 4, not so sure. Of course, the Commanders are owned by an owner, Josh Harris, who also owns a hockey team and a basketball team. So, and they're not even in town. But just having observed Ted for a long period of time, he would not be my first choice for owner of the Nationals. So. This is interesting. You think of coaches and how they produce coaches that come off their coaching tree. Bill Walsh was great. Bill Walsh with Holmgren and Andy Reid. I'm probably missing a couple of other. Shanahan came off his tree. These are guys who won a bunch of Super Bowls. He was great at developing coaches who go on to other teams and win. Joe Gibbs, great a coach as he was, didn't really have any success with that. Dan Henning got a couple of shots, didn't win. I think there were 1 or 2 others who became head. Poor Richie Pettibone waited all those years to get the job, and by the time he did, the team was old. The salary cap was coming. He went 4-12 and never coached again. So it doesn't always work well with great coaches producing other coaches. Look at Bill Belichick. Josh McDaniel failed twice. So it doesn't translate that. You'd think, learning at the feet of a great coach would make you a great coach. Doesn't happen that way. Dan Quinn has yet to win a Super Bowl, but he's been to a Super Bowl, and he did a spectacular job last year. His mentor in the NFL is Pete Carroll. He went to 2 Super Bowls with Carroll, won one as the defensive coordinator in Seattle, and then got his opportunity to go to Atlanta, where he went to a Super Bowl and maybe building a Super Bowl team here. Now he faces his mentor on Sunday as the Raiders come here, and this is what Quinn said about matching up with them.
Yeah, we've gone against each other a number of times, over the last, 10 years or so. What did I learn? Man, a lot. And he helped me grow. He helped me develop. like most times when you get to help bring someone along, confidence, belief. So I'd been a defensive line coach for a long time, and I'd left for 2 years to go to Florida, brought me back as the DC, and so that's the type of confidence and belief. For him, I think, like his rock-solid philosophy. That's such an important thing that you need as a head coach. Sometimes as a play caller, you're just this unit, just thing, but as the head coach, man, it's everything. And so two of the very best that I've been around in instilling a philosophy was Pete and Nick Saban. And they both, everybody knew how you get down and what's required and what it's about. And so that was such an important time for me. And also doing it in your own authentic way. I've certainly learned a lot from him, but I would, think it's more in my flavor of how I do it, but it was certainly a really important part for me.
Yeah, you got to be your own guy. You can't pretend to be somebody else. But those are pretty good guys to learn from. Pete Carroll also won a national championship in college football. Saban had 2 years as a head coach in Miami, did not succeed there. But yeah, those are two guys that you can learn from. This is another question came up yesterday. Good point. First 2 games, no turnovers. They haven't turned the ball over themselves, but for a team that talks about creating turnovers, they haven't done it yet.
In the Giants game, I thought the defense took some shots. We had maybe a few chances at one. There was one that got called back on a penalty on a Quan interception. Thought another one, Revo might have forced one. We didn't get it, but there was some good. I thought J.K. had a real violent shot at it. Not so much in Green Bay to where we had our chances to go get it. But you do have to take them, takeaways. Not something they're just going to give to you. So we got to be mindful. So in one game, it didn't go our way in terms of getting them, but I thought the attitude and intention of taking them was there. In the second one, we didn't meet the mark. So it's a really important part of it. I thought in the Giant game, almost one with Nick Bellore on special teams, by the covering, the hitting, and that's another phase that we, kind of think of the covering on punts and the covering of kicks as like a defensive phase to it, the returns as like an offensive phase of taking care of it. But it's really important, and we know it helps us win. You can't be, reckless to just take a shot at the ball and not, tackle and hit. But, we got to improve in that spot.
Well, they may get a real shot on Sunday because Geno Smith threw 3 interceptions on Monday night against Los Angeles. So there will be opportunities there. Let's see if they take advantage of it. As far as the quarterback's position, we'll see. Quinn did say yesterday that he's got to see Jayden Daniels practice before he makes a decision on whether he plays Sunday or not. So Daniels didn't practice yesterday. I believe it's unlikely he's going to practice today. If he goes on Friday, maybe he's got a shot, but all the signs are pointing to Marcus Mariota getting the start. Mariota got all the first-team reps yesterday, and the way it works with the news conferences on Wednesday, that the quarterback that takes the first-team reps does the news conference. So Mariota did that. He said he prepares every game as if he's going to start. Doesn't know what's going to happen. Going to be prepared for anything. Actually said the offense doesn't change that much, and it probably doesn't. But the one thing that Daniels can do much better than Mariota is he can make something out of nothing. And although Mariota did play well last year, played well against a bad Carolina team after Jayden went out early with that broken rib, and then in the last game of the year when they wanted to protect Jayden from Micah Parsons, you saw him play the second half and ended it with throwing a touchdown pass to Terry McLaurin to beat the Cowboys on the road. McLaurin yesterday, who You know the story of all the quarterbacks that he's played with. He did play with Mariota last year, but this will be, if Mariota starts, the first game that McLaurin has played with Mariota as a starter here in Washington.
I've had experience playing with multiple guys, and so my philosophy and mindset's always the same, is just try to be on the same page as the quarterback and make those tough plays when they need me to, because I feel like that really helps their rhythm and their trust to be able to know that I'm going to win when I'm out on the perimeter. So the great thing about it, Marcus and I, again, have had a lot of reps together, dating back to even Dallas, the Dallas game at the end of the season where we had the game-winning touchdown. So the timing is there. The great thing about it, we're both vets, so we know, have a good feel of just this offense and what it's supposed to look like. So if he's a starter this week, we have a lot of confidence in that we're going to have a chance to win the game.
That's Terry McLaurin yesterday. The audio is a little low, but the gist of it is, he's had plenty of reps with Marcus Mariota. So should not be an issue on Sunday. Last thing, Preston Smith is back. If you haven't been paying attention to this, Preston Smith was a second-round pick in 2015. This was the Jay Gruden Redskins. They took Brandon Sheriff in the first round. Now, this is when they had Mike McCloughan as the general manager. And at one point, a frustrated Jay Gruden said, we took a guard in the first round. Well, they took Brandon Sheriff, who they projected to be a tackle, wound up playing guard, and was an all-pro. He was very good here. They chose not to re-sign him. He went to Jacksonville for a few years. They cut him loose at the end of this year, end of last year, because of injury, and he retired. So he's out of the league now. Jamison Crowder has had 2 stints here. First coming here in 2015, and then coming back last year as a kick returner and a wide receiver. Actually caught a touchdown pass last year. And then Preston Smith was taken in the second round and played pretty well. But he got a big contract to go to the Green Bay Packers. It was $55 million. And during the course of his seasons there, he was there from 2019 to 2024. He got traded last year in the middle of the year to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They chose not to re-sign him. But in those years at Green Bay, he had 44 sacks. So he has been able to do that. He's 33 years old now. But they're kind of desperate to get some kind of pass rush. They need somebody to rush the quarterback, and short of making a deal for a big time pass rusher, which just aren't available. We'll see if they got something left in the tank with Smith, who said something funny yesterday about coming back to Washington. Remember, he left here after the 2018 season. They were the Redskins for one more year, 2019. 2020, after all the reporting in the Post, and Dan Snyder caved to pressure, and as he said, retired the name Redskins. They were a Washington football team for 2 years. Now the Commanders. Now Preston Smith returns to a familiar city, but not a familiar logo or name.
Man, it's ecstatic, man, to be back where it started at and have a chance to come back and finish my career. Well, this ain't going to be the end, but to continue my career in a place where it started, man. It's a great feeling just to, be back on the field and have a chance to go out there and prove myself, go out there and play at a high level again.
What do you think you can bring to this defense right now?
I can bring experience, a guy who knows how to get to the quarterback, a guy who's versatile, a guy that can be used anyway, and a guy that can be an asset to this defense and this team overall.
From a Redskin to a Commander, you okay with all the uniform and all the changes?
Yeah, man. I wasn't here between all the identity crises, but I'm happy to be back here now, man. The colors will stay the same, and I see they doing a lot of good things with the uniforms that are like bringing back the old retro styles and stuff like that. Yeah,
3 games this year, similar to the uniforms that he wore with a different helmet logo. But I love that identity crisis. I don't think I've ever talked about it that way, but yeah, there continues to be an identity crisis because we still have a large percentage of the fan base who says, you got to bring back Redskins, The chirping that the president did a couple of months ago, like, we're not going to let them move into D.C. unless they change the name. I think that ship has sailed now. I don't think there's any shenanigans that he can pull right now that would force them to go back to the name Redskins, because the deal has been approved by the city council, so I don't think there's any interference that he can have. So they will remain the Commanders, as Josh Harris said they would about a year ago, or more than a year ago, that they were not going to change the name back. So that's where we are, and Preston Smith will have familiar colors. The logo on the helmet will be different, and even when they go to the throwback uniforms for those 3 games, I think the first one is a night game against Seattle. He will have a different helmet logo, but I do like that identity crisis that they had. All right, coming up, this was a show that came out on this day in 1965. It lasted for 5 years, but has become a cult classic, and in many ways, unlike any other sitcom that I can remember growing up. I Dream of Jeannie. Its first show 60 years ago today.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Graham is coming up at 11. Without question, the 1960s were the height of silliness for sitcoms. We had a show that lasted, I think, 1 year called My Mother the Car with Jerry Van Dyke, that Ann Sheridan, she was the voice of the car, his mother had come back as a 1928 Porter, which was a car, and they had a theme song for that. There was the Patty Duke show, where Patty Duke played Patty Duke, or Patty, whatever her name was, and her cousin from England who looked just like her. They walk alike, they talk alike, at times they even sound alike. You could lose your mind, blah, blah, blah. You know, and again, each of these shows had a theme song that went along with it. The Munsters, you know, and they had lyrics for the theme song. There's also a show that premiered on this day in 1965, September 18th, 1965, 60 years ago, called I Dream of Jeannie, and it had a theme song, but no lyrics. But everybody could do this, right? Everybody could watch that show. Most of us in reruns. Let's see, I was 7 years old when this show came out. It was created by Sidney Sheldon. It starred Barbara Eden as a 2,000-year-old Jeannie and Larry Hagman, who would gain greater fame later on as J.R. Ewing, who shot J.R. in the show Dallas. He was an astronaut. They fall in love, and they ultimately get married as they were looking for more juice to the show at the end. Even still, it lasted 139 episodes and 5 years, which is 5 times as long as My Mother the Car, but again, no lyrics in the show. This was the opening. This is how it all began on this day in 1965, as Larry Hagman is identified in this show as Major Nelson, and Major Nelson goes on a mission. We were in the height of the space exploration. We had not yet landed a man on the moon, but we got good old Larry, good old Major Nelson, up in a capsule.
Once upon a time, in a mythical place called Cape Kennedy, an astronaut named Tony Nelson went up on a space mission. The missile went up, but something went wrong, and they had to bring it down. Captain Nelson landed on an island in the South Pacific, where he found a bottle. At least it looked like a bottle, but it didn't act like a bottle, because in it was a genie. Oh, not your average everyday genie, but a beautiful genie who could grant any wish.
Yeah, so, you know, this would have been very helpful to Tom Hanks had he gotten this bottle when he landed on the island in Castaway. He wouldn't have had to spend 4 years, because he just would have wished that the genie would take him off the island. But fortunately, this fictional Cape Kennedy was able to send out a helicopter and find good old Major Nelson, but not before he got a big wet kiss from a very attractive Barbara Eden, who, by the way, is now 94 years old. So she was 34 at the time. And, the two of them like to reminisce in the years that came later on about that opening scene.
I really did the scene, you know, and she throws her arms around.
Oh, yeah, that scene.
Scared you to death.
When I found the bottle in the thing.
Right.
Yeah. How'd you like it?
I liked it. I liked it.
And, you know, as young people, we like to watch that as well. Now, the sponsors, not the sponsors, but the censors, this again, 60 years ago, she was in an outfit that was, yes, very sexy, but the censors said you could not show the belly button. The belly button had to be covered up. The midriff was partially bare, but no belly button showing on screen in 1965. And then Barbara Eden, in recent years, said this.
No, Jeannie wasn't sexy. She really wasn't. I've played sexy parts. The How to Marry a Millionaire, for instance, the first TV series I did at Fox. Now, that was deliberately sexy. But not Jeannie. Jeannie was a genie, and she was a tomboy, really. She was full of energy, loved what she did, knew what she did was right and good, and she could do it for him. Now, it didn't always work in our world. It wasn't because she was stupid. It was just because she was a fish out of water. And her best efforts in this world didn't work too well, you know?
Yeah, and then they got to the point with Jeannie where it was not believable that Major Nelson, as a bachelor, would have Jeannie go back on her bottle at night. And you would see they would have a camera supposedly inside the bottle, and she had a nice living room and all that. But in order to have them, do what you would think, they had to get them married. So they got married in the later episodes. The show came to an end in 1970. Larry Hagman, as I say, later big fame as J.R. Ewing in Dallas, and Barbara Eden, though she did some things afterwards. I think she's even done theater, and she's done some movies, some made-for-TV movies, some TV shows. She really never, captured the same kind of fame that she got as Jeannie, and I Dream of Jeannie. But it's not one of those shows that she says made her necessarily typecast, and has no regrets about playing the part.
I really had a good time all the time on that show. I enjoyed that part. I loved working with Larry and Bill and Sydney. It was a very, very, very warm, cuddly part of my life.
Yeah, me too, as a viewer. I would say that as well. It also had Bill Daly in it. He played kind of Tony's buddy, Major Healy, Roger Healy, and he later showed up on the Bob Newhart show as a neighbor, also a pilot. So they stuck with him as a pilot because I think most people who had watched I Dream of Jeannie, it was sort of a segue. I think the Newhart show premiered in 1970 when I Dream of Jeannie ended. Oh, well, let's just keep him as a pilot. So he would sometimes pop in on Bob. Hiya, Bob. Hi, Bob. It was a big drinking game. Hi, Bob. Hayden Rourke was Colonel Bellows, and you always had this kind of character in the show who was always close to finding him out. It was kind of like in Superman where they would always come close to figuring out that Clark Kent was Superman. And Hayden Rourke was also a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and he would look at Tony's behavior, and they couldn't see Jeannie. Like, Jeannie could sometimes show up and be invisible, and he could see her, Major Healy, but the others couldn't. So they always thought he's a little bit nuts on that. But yeah, I mean, you think about all the sitcoms that you watched as a kid, particularly on reruns. And at least for me, I Dream of Jeannie stands out, and shame on the censors for not letting her show belly button. All right, that's enough for me today. Oh, tomorrow's Friday. Bram is up next. I'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m.